All right, we need to talk about a planetary defense system. But I'm not talking about asteroids or, aliens. Nope. We're talking about a completely invisible threat coming from our very own sun that could literally knock our civilization back to the dark ages. I want you to just imagine for a second. What if you woke up tomorrow and the internet was just gone? No GPS, no electricity. It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, right? But this threat is absolutely real, and it's coming from 93 million miles away. And look, this isn't some far-off hypothetical problem. It's happened before. Back in 1859, there was something called the Carrington event. A massive solar storm slammed into Earth, and it was so powerful, it set telegraph systems, the high-tech of the day, mind you, on fire. Operators were getting shocked. Now just try to imagine that same raw energy hitting our super-connected world today. A modern Carrington event wouldn't just be bad, it would be a civilization-level catastrophe. We're talking about a complete collapse of power grids all over the world. Your GPS, gone. Satellite communications, shut down completely. Even flying in a plane would become incredibly dangerous. I mean, our entire way of life, everything we take for granted, it all depends on these delicate systems. And the cost? Well, the immediate economic hit is estimated to be in the trillions of dollars. But honestly, that's not even the scariest part. The truly terrifying thing is how long it would take to recover. We're not talking days or weeks here. We're talking years, possibly even a decade, to rebuild all of that fried infrastructure. So that's the threat. It's big. It's real. So the question is, how do we protect ourselves? Now, you might be thinking, doesn't Earth have its own shield? And you're right, it does. Its magnetic field. But, and this is a big but, our one and only natural shield is starting to show some cracks. That magnetic field is literally the only thing standing between us and a constant barrage of solar radiation. It's the reason we have an atmosphere, the reason life even exists here. But here's the kicker. It's weakening. It's losing about 5% of its strength every single century, which means sooner or later, we're definitely going to need a backup plan. And that brings us to the main event, a huge, audacious idea, a planetary-scale engineering project that sounds like pure science fiction. But think of it less like building a giant wall in space and more like taking out the ultimate insurance policy for our planet. Okay, so here's the concept. An artificial magnetic shield. What is that? Well, in a nutshell, it's a giant electromagnetic shield that we would park out in space at what's called the L1 Lagrange point. Now, that's a really special spot. It's gravitationally stable, about 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, right between us and the Sun. It's basically the perfect forward operating base for a planetary sentry. And it's really important to get this. This isn't some physical barrier that's going to block stuff like a wall. A better way to think about it is like a giant magnetic umbrella. It generates its own super powerful magnetic field, creating this protective bubble way out in front of Earth that just deflects the worst of that solar wind long before it ever has a chance to reach us. Okay, so how would this thing actually work? The science behind it is actually pretty elegant, It really all just boils down to bending the path of tiny charged particles. It's basically a 3-step process. Step 1. This giant superconducting loop out at the L1 point generates a really powerful but localized magnetic field. Step 2, the solar wind, which is just this stream of charged particles, protons and electrons, comes flying towards Earth and has to pass right through that field. And then step 3, the magnetic force just gently curves the path of those particles, pushing them away from Earth. It's like steering the storm right around us. And to give you a sense of the sheer power we're talking about here, just look at this comparison. Earth's natural magnetic field, it's measured in microteslas. It's tiny. This artificial shield, on the other hand, would generate a field measured in teslas. That's not just a little stronger. That's a force literally hundreds of thousands of times more powerful, all concentrated in the one spot we need it most. And the effect of that? Absolutely profound. Simulations show that a shield with this kind of muscle, sitting out at L1, could knock down the impact of a major coronal mass ejection, one of those planet killer storms, by up to 90%. That is a game changer. All right, so the physics totally works, but that leaves the billion-dollar question, or maybe trillion-dollar question. How on Earth, or maybe I should say off Earth, do you build something this massive? Well, this is where the plan starts to feel like it's straight out of the future. See, the genius of the plan is that we'd avoid the insane cost of launching all this stuff from Earth. The first stage would be mining and manufacturing the superconducting materials right there on the moon. Then, instead of rockets, we'd use electromagnetic mass drivers to basically fling the components into orbit. After that, we'd unleash fleets of autonomous robots to assemble the whole thing in space. And for the final stage, we just gently move the completed shield into its permanent, stable orbit. But building something like this, it's about so much more than just stopping a disaster. It would actually represent a fundamental shift in how we as a species relate to the universe around us. I mean, the benefits would be huge and wide-ranging. The biggest piece of the pie, obviously, is protecting all the tech that our modern world runs on. Power grids, GPS, the internet, you name it. But it also secures the future of space travel, keeping our astronauts and satellites safe. It saves us from trillions in economic damages. And get this, it could even help our climate by protecting the ozone layer from getting blasted by solar particles. And that really brings us to the key takeaway here. The best way to think about this shield is as a cosmic seatbelt. As we continue to venture out into space and become a true spacefaring species, we just can't afford to be vulnerable to the random tantrums of our own star. It's an absolutely essential safety measure for the next leg of our journey. And that's why, ultimately, a project like this changes everything. It would be the moment humanity stops being just a passive passenger on this planet and becomes an active guardian, finally capable of defending our home from threats on a cosmic scale. So that leaves us with one final big question. If we can actually do this, if we can build a magnetic shield to protect the entire planet, what other grand challenges are suddenly within our reach? As the new guardians of Earth, what massive problem should we decide to solve next?